wanted to get into the EDI world forever. So when I graduated college, I did all of these informational interviews just to see how people got into it. And everyone was like, I have no idea. Like, I don't know how you get your foot in the door. When they graduated college, there wasn't like a space. There wasn't EDI consultants as there were. It was like individual practitioners. And so when I fell upon DJA, I was like, where is this coming from? But there wasn't a space where there's not a clear path to get there, right? As much as there is now. But I talked to so many people and most of them were like, well, I was like the Black woman in HR, so now I'm here. Or like I started in like higher ed and then came here, but there was none of them went into the workforce looking for this type of space. So it's very interesting.
So that's the other thing that I think is really cool that you bring up is that equity, diversity, and inclusion has shifted so significantly. I mean, that was absolutely my experience, that I didn't even go out to set out to be an EDI practitioner. I saw myself as an activist, and I was just kind of doing that work. And then over time, I started transitioning into consulting, but I didn't really have an idea about what my career path would be because there wasn't a career path. It was just me passionately kind of following opportunities, and when doors opened, I would go ahead and explore them. But there wasn't a real clear career path. And now there's so many opportunities for certifications and professional development and PhDs or, areas of focused concentration in an MBA program. So there's so many more robust ways. What that also means is that there's a lot of people out there saying, I do EDI. Right. And that's also a place where, I don't know, I don't know if I have mixed feelings about that. Like, I also feel like just because you're the Black woman in HR doesn't necessarily mean that you have deep end of the pool expertise on kind of dismantling and or reconstructing systems that are going to make them more equitable without actually having some pretty significant understanding of some of the foundational things that some people who have been in this work for a long time have invested in. It doesn't have to just be you've invested in it over a long time. I'm not trying to say it just has to be age related, but really also understanding things like organizational development, or really understanding some of the behavioral sciences, and really having a solid understanding of kind of sociological and neurological kind of concepts that will allow for a really solid foundation. And I feel like those are some of the shifts that are happening right now as more and more people are finding themselves interested in being a practitioner or a consultant or in this space.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, like, you touched on something pretty important. It's like you have to know where we've been to have a good idea of like where we're going. And there's been so many people that have been in this, like the DEI or EDI practitioners in the world of diversity, this industry, that have done a lot of work, but they've also tried a lot of things. And so you have a better understanding of like what actually changes a system versus repeating the exact same steps and moves. And I think that's pretty important, and that's something that gets lost. Maybe nowadays there's a lot of enthusiasm of people entering our industry, and that's great. That means there's passion there. But I think that there's a false connotation of like what has been done in the past and all the work people have put in before us.
Yeah.
And so now when I look and hear some of the things people are saying, I'm like, oh, I don't think they have an understanding that was tried. Like people in the 80s were talking about that, and people in the early 2000s tried to implement something like that. And so I think we could easily get lost in this loop of really thinking that these ideas and practices are new, but they're not. So like the real base of transformation, you have to have a good understanding.
Yeah. It's interesting. Which is, I think what you're saying is actually making the case for the not just cross-generational, but also all the different voices really being in this space together. The other thing that's really different now about equity, diversity, and inclusion is that it's global, right? And so, as a practitioner, when I was early in my career, I spent so much of my time researching and studying and even practicing in the United States. And in the United States, in communities that were particularly lacking diversity, or that were really wrestling with specific areas where they needed to, make sure that there's more equitable access, where we were trying to pass policies and laws to make sure that hate crime legislation was in place, right? Those sorts of things. But now the kinds of people that we interact with are literally across the globe. And you know that. We spend all of our time talking to people who are in Brazil and in New Zealand and Australia and China and Hong Kong, and it's wonderful. But we also are thinking of kind of next generation equity, diversity, and inclusion is so much more than local. It's absolutely global. And it's incredibly local, right? It's so incredibly local that we also really have the ability to understand the nuances associated with the needs and experiences of particular macro cultures and then micro cultures, right? And how that plays out differently in different parts of the world and over time.